How's it going, YouTube? Convention today with another video, and today I have where to hand trap, the follow-up with the new decks and some of the older decks and things that I think that you should watch out for. Thank you so much for 1,000 likes on the last video. I really do appreciate it. I love going for like goals. It's a lot of fun. But here we are with part 2. And there's going to be more parts after this, but I do hope that this helps you. Of course, the series will always be going on, so this is just another part in the whole series. But if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over at Imperium, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, REW, or Grimoire, go ahead and check them all out. But also, go in the description and find my TCGPlayer Link. If you click it and then you buy cards while you're on that link, I will get some of the profits from that, which is awesome, and it directly supports the channel for doing things that you're already doing. So that's something that is fantastic. It'll help me a lot. I'm also feeling a lot better. I'm going to work tomorrow, which of course the vacation couldn't last forever, but it is what it is, and I'm just glad that I'm feeling better. I'm feeling myself. I'm able to go out and do things. I still got to take it easy, but I mean, we're doing better. And if you haven't already followed my Twitter or Twitch, definitely go ahead and do that too. Without further ado, let's hop right on into the first way to hand trap. So the first one I have for you today is going to be Fire King. So not much has changed here. Drone Lockbird's still going to be really solid. Impulse, the Molcharmies. It's really rare that I throw the Molcharmies into any of these because they're just generically good against just about everything. Except Centur-Ion, they're both pretty against it. But even like Perilia is like fine into that matchup. But I still think that they're cards that I would not keep in my deck going into siding if I had other things that were even a slight bit better. Having Bell this format has even seemed a little bit better. You know, I've talked to a lot of people and even my teammate Craig, and one thing that's really good about Bell is it's really solid even into things like Tenpai in the battle phase. So just things to think about. But I do like it against Fire King into the Kirin effect. Of course, we don't like that non-targeting destruction, and then the free reborn of things like Arvada. So you want to make sure you have a Bell or an answer for the Kirin. Then we also want to make sure we're ashing the effect of Deception, or we're just going to Ogre the card to get rid of it completely. Droll is just going to be a godsend into this matchup, as always has been against Fire King. I really do think that stopping the actual Snake Eye cards against the Fire King variant is incorrect. The second you start stopping the Snake Eye cards, it's just really unfortunate when your opponent just goes, well, here's Original Sin. They go right into Ponix and full combo through Fire King anyway. So I would say it's almost more correct to just be like, yeah, that's cool. They go like Ash, Poplar, Original Sin because they don't play Divine Temple at that point. Original Sin, summon Ponix, and then you just imperm the Ponix. I think that's really solid. You can also hold Ash for Fire King Island if you need to. If your opponent just starts off with like normal summon Ulcanix, so I'm always just hitting that with the Veiler and Imperm. And then if you feel so inclined to stop the Dia Bellstar, you can, but it's like my last ditch effort. I'm always trying to go for like the Ulcanix or the Ponix. I think that they're just the most effective. And then if your opponent leads with like Deception, then you can go ahead and stop that. But if your opponent leads like Witch and you open like Imperm Ogre, then just let Witch resolve and just Ogre the Deception. And then when they continue to play with like a Ponix, you just imperm the Ponix. So I think that stopping Witch has been a lot less good, and that's definitely something to keep in mind moving forward. Now for Centur-Ion. I think this is really important to talk about because with Centur-Ion, the Molcharmies are not that good, but Impulse is pretty crazy against this matchup, I can't even lie. So another thing too is if you start clearing their board and they use Phalanx Engrave to revive, having Bell to stop that is really nice. It's not going to come up as much as you'd want it to, but it's still like a lower impact card that I wanted to bring up for like the Phalanx effect. Definitely go ahead and Ogre the Trudea. It is nice to hit it when it tries to come out of the spell and trap zone, but usually it's going to be on the field trying to move back to the spell and trap zone. So if your opponent does that and then puts like Primera down, and then you can Ogre the Primera, it's fine, but I'm probably just trying to go after the Trudea to not get that many names in rotation. If your opponent leads the field spell and they go pitch one to put in spell trap zone, Ogre the field spell 100% of the time, don't even mess around with it. But if your opponent leads Trudea, then you're going to want to go ahead and just Ogre Trudea. I think that it's really important to start with Auxilia, move to the new Synchro, and then Primera. I think that the new Synchro is still a better stop than Primera, but I think Auxilia with an Imperm is the best one you have, because not only do you deny a search, but you also deny the reset up in the spell trap zone. So that's going to be really important, and something that you really want to keep in mind is usually you just want to shut down the Auxilia whenever you're going against this deck with like an Imperm, a Mourner, a Veiler, whatever you have. As far as like an Ash goes though, it usually isn't Auxilia. It's going to be the new Synchro, and then the Primera. You kind of have to judge it correctly though, because if your opponent leads Primera, I might be more inclined to just Ash Primera, because when my opponent doesn't have the stand up, then it's going to be really awkward for them to be able to do more. But I still like hitting the new Synchro with the Ash Blossom, because you also turn off the Autry draw if they don't already have an emblem card. Introducing the Exo Sister of next format. Now, this is definitely just going to be like Exo Sister was in tier format. We are moving into the Ryzeal format, where it's going to be very Exceed heavy. Now, I will say that Fire King Snake Eye will continue to just dominate the game, same with Tenpai, until we get a ban list, which probably won't come till after Anaheim. So Ryzeal and Maliss realistically won't really do anything until the other decks are addressed. Like, they'll be in the room and they'll perform, right? And I think they're cool decks. But, like, the overall ceiling and power of Azumina, Fire King, Snake Eye is insane. And then also just Tenpai, right? So I do think that there's a little saving grace with the fact that Maliss and Ryzeal don't really care about Shifter. So at that point, it makes Tenpai less of a Shifter deck and more of, I'm going to try to break your board and kill you. But another thing that you'll see here is that some of these don't have as many hand traps that are specific. They're just more generic, like this bell here. I think that playing a good mixture of board breakers and hand traps next format is going to be really important, because of the fact that hand traps are like less good, especially against Maliss. Hand traps don't really do that much, but board breakers are insane. So that's one thing where I'm leaning more board breakers right now, but we'll see how it really plays out once we get all the cards. I'm just trying to let you know that you might have to be prepared for a little bit of both, or even more toward board breakers. But Bell, generically good here. There's like 100 cards in this deck that all revive themselves in the graveyard. It's really going to be situational as to what you think your opponent still has and what you think is decent enough to stop from coming back. But there's so many cards that just activate in the grave in this deck that none of them are particularly important to come back. It's just a matter of at which point in time do you think that it's more important for them to have the body or not have the body. I do think that you should be holding Imperium for Gavanga. I think that card's crazy. Is just like an interruption on your turn. So that's one thing where if you're going to start off your turn, you might as well just Imperium Gabanga and then go about your turn. If you do have Imperium, though, go after the Goblin Biker's Gone Wild. I think that card's absolutely crazy. The Graveyard Effect to go ahead and attach to an Exceed is also very good. I would go ahead and say stop this level 3 Goblin Biker down here, because it does search as spell or trap. But this is also going to be like a free summon, or one that you're going to summon off of Gone Wild anyway. So it's definitely just going to be stopping Gone Wild first and then the little one second, unless they just go like normal summon the smaller one here and try to use the effect. Then I'd probably just go ahead and Valor Impermit. But if you have the opportunity to go ahead and stop the Gone Wild first, I would stop that first. Grand Entrance is going to be the one that you want to stop here. The one beneath it is going to be like a Bone Party or like a Tenyi Heavenly Circle. So just be aware that this is here. This is still a good one to stop, but I'm definitely always saying to stop the Grand Entrance. It's just better. And then the Retaliating Sea, DD Crow, and Droll are all very generically good in this matchup. Things that you just definitely want. Melodious gets absolutely bodied by Retaliating Sea. I think that card's absolutely just so absurd. And you can make like Baguska and pass for the most part. Bell onto the effect of Botcha in the graveyard to revive. You want to Ogre the Link 2, because the Link 2 has to summon to the arrows it points to, so if you Ogre it, the effect won't resolve. And then you can also Ogre the Couplet if they try to go for the Concerto. If you don't want that to happen, you can always Ogre the Couplet. You also get rid of the material for them, so it's equally as valuable. If it's an early game situation and you want to go ahead and Ogre the Couplet instead of the Link 2, I think that's perfectly fine. Ashing the Ostinato, of course, if this card slams down, you want to hit Ostinato. But if you want to go for the Etoile and you want to just go ahead and clear the board, just clear the Etoile if they let it die, or if you Kaiju it, right? And then when they use the effect, just Ash it, because it summons from deck or extra deck, so it just gives you such free reign to just do whatever you want at that point. Mourner, Valor, Imperium. You want to use all of these onto the Botcha. If your opponent just normal summons a Refrain to go ahead and start their combo off, make sure you Valor Imperium that for sure if that's their first play. But otherwise, you want to go ahead and throw everything at the Botcha. So, one thing that I want to say in the top left here, it says set 1 with the Cosmic. If your opponent normal summons the White Rabbit here on the right underneath the Imperium, Impermit, Valor it immediately, right? You want to clear this card so your opponent doesn't get to set one of the traps. If your opponent sets a card, you want to make sure that you're able to Cosmic that card as soon as possible. Because if your opponent commits like a Link to the board, or if they just want to clear one of their main deck monsters, and you try to imperm it, it's going to work like a 10E circle where it's going to go ahead and flip and then get rid of the monster. So that's one thing where you want to make sure that you're not falling for that. So if you are going to be interacting with anything, keep that in mind, but it only gets rid of the monster the turn that it's set. So if it's the following turn, you don't have to worry about that. These kind of work like weather painters in a way, which is very interesting. This is another deck, though, where I don't really recommend specific hand traps. Like, Lancia is just OTK against this deck. It actually is just so crazy. So is Droll. I think Droll is crazy against this deck. Nibiru is like okay because it can reborn still, but it still destroys the board from being like a Heat Soul board or what have you. So I still like Nibiru against this matchup. And then Impulse is just a godsend against this matchup. You want to Ash the field spell so they don't get a free body. Then you also want to consider holding Ash for the MTP trap, because this is the one that's going to allow your opponent to non-targeting banish a card in the field if they control a link. So that's going to be really important because it goes along with the search effect, so you can go ahead and just Ash the MTP and then not have to worry about it at all. So that's one thing where if you are okay with them building whatever board they're going to do, then hold your Ash for the MTP. If you think that it's going to stop their turn completely, then just hit the Underground. And then Valor, Imperm, the White Rabbit, or if they special it, Mourner it. Still a very good card to stop. I think the other two are like okay. If they start with Dormouse, you can definitely go ahead and Valor Imperm that as well. So it's essentially just going to be if they start with the White Rabbit or the Dormouse. But I do like hitting White Rabbit though, just because the traps are so valuable in this deck. They also get to them off the White Binder. But again, if your opponent has a set and you're going to be interacting with their monsters, just know that they're just going to clear their monster if you go ahead and drop like a Valor and Imperm on them. So just be very careful with your target negation. This is part of the reason why I'm kind of like, you know what? It's nice to make sure that you have kaijus in your deck, right? Because these are things where like you can kaiju their monster, they can bring it back, that's fine, but it doesn't really do anything. And even if it's the Link 3 that interacts, it shuffles one back from the banish. So unless they're under shifter or they have something banished, then you only really have to deal with like one more interruption. There's not a whole lot of worry behind this deck. It feels very similar to just like a standard Heat Soul deck or like a Marinsa's deck passing on Argonaut. So that's something where I'm not really too concerned because the follow-up in this deck and Ryzeal, to be honest, aren't even that great. So that's something where you really want to make sure that you're on top of understanding where the resources go and what monsters to hit in particular. So White Rabbit or Dormouse, I'd probably hit White Rabbit first, but whichever one they start with is a-okay. And then holding Ash for MTP is not all that bad either. Now, I'm going to wait for an official Konami ruling on this, but you should be aware that this is the rumblings of how Ryzeal Cross is going to work. Once per turn, when an opponent's activated monster effect resolves, you can detach one, negate the effect. This doesn't activate, it just happens. And this means that if you have Chain Link 1, Chain Link 2, if your Chain Link 2 resolves and it just happens, right? Like your card just goes off, does what it does, and then your Chain Link 1 goes to resolve, they can just detach one and negate the Chain Link 1. So if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, negating in a chain is something that does happen, and now we have a card that works like Magic the Gathering, where you're negating in the chain. So again, I'm going to wait for a Konami ruling on this, but as far as I know, that is how the card works right now. And big shout outs to my teammate Craig Smith. We talk a lot about this, a lot about this, because this deck is just going to be coming out. It's going to be very popular, and you want to make sure that you're on top of stopping the deck as much as possible. I'm definitely holding Imperm for Detonator on my turn, but if your opponent drops a Duo Drive, it's going to be nice to just go ahead and stop that immediately. If you have like two Imperms or like a Valor and Imperm, you're dropping the Valor first. Yeah, I know it plays into talent, but like I'm always trying to hold the Imperm for the Detonator. The Detonator is not once per turn, so if it has 4 materials, it gets 4 pops, which is kind of crazy. So if you can hold Imperm, hold Imperm. Ash, Mourner, Valor, Imperm onto Duo Drive. You do not want this thing to resolve. Droll is also very good against this matchup. There's so much searching. And then Bell onto the Plug, or you could use Crow. And same with the Twins of the Eclipse. The Twins of the Eclipse is going to target 2 of your Xyz in your grave and then make a new one on your board using both of them. So you want to make sure that you just go ahead and Crow 1. But at the same point, both of these cards are very strong, and you want to make sure that you're on top of stopping them. This format is definitely going to be interesting, and there's going to be more way to hand traps down the road, but I do hope that these helped you, at least for now, in your testing, and we'll get more in depth as we get closer to the format. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, like the video, comment down below what you're playing next format, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.